Welcome back. It's Fusion Fantasy Football. I'm your host, Joshua. And today I'm going to be showing you how to use my format beater tool for your new fantasy leagues, even your existing ones, but particularly if you have a startup league coming up in a dynasty league. Maybe unusual custom scorings are much more popular these days, and you want to figure out how that affects the players and how you're going to prioritize them. That's what I made this for. It's something that I always was curious about. We always talk about how it's a great idea to go back and look at previous seasons' players and how they actually finished with their season. It helps you get a feel for how the scoring actually plays out. Maybe there's bonuses and so on. Now, the shortcomings I have is I don't have any scoring settings for tiered PPR. That is, if the plays are longer than 10 yards, 20 yards, 30 yards, or bonuses. If they get more than 100 yards total, they get an extra amount of points. So if those play heavily into your league scoring, unfortunately, I'm not able to build something to help you with that yet. But for any positional specific scoring that involves your typical, of course, yards, carries, attempts, receptions, even attempts or targets, or maybe first downs, both receiving and or rushing separately. Those I can do, and that's going to cover just about most of you, especially for just your basic tight end premium leagues. This is definitely going to help you get a firm grasp on how it affects big picture, the differences between the positions. So I'm going to show you it now. Let's take a quick look. Here it is. So format beater. Right away, maybe it looks a little I don't know, imposing, a lot of numbers on the page here, right? But it's pretty simple when you break it down and look a little closer. Basically, all it's saying is here, the quarterback won. And again, this is the average for the past 4 seasons. So what this helps with, it helps us get an idea beyond any outliers. When you go back and look at last year's scoring, it's going to help you get an idea of how it played out, but it's not going to quite help you project that forward. Particularly, we're going to look at it in a little while, if you're looking at 2020 stats, because 2020 stats were crazy if you hadn't heard. They were for everyone, particularly quarterbacks, but just scoring across the board was high, not necessarily for any players other than quarterbacks, but it's going to be something to keep an eye on, and it's going to maybe affect things. And we'll look into that. We'll dig into that as we go. But I'm using a 4-year average, so it blends out. 2017 was a down year for offenses. That's not going to matter. This blends it out into an average. And so here you see quarterback 1, 4-year average is 395 points. And that's about what we saw this season. Of course, we saw more breaking 400 and a couple more coming even close. So really we had 3 quarterback ones, at least at this kind of scoring in this past season. That's okay. I'm not sure you're going to see that again next season, not to that extent at least. But really the biggest highlight here is not just showing you how many points the quarterback 1 scores on average, but it's showing you how much it scores on average versus the running back 1 and the wide receiver 1, and so on. That's really what you're going to be able to see here, the differences between the positions at any given point, and also the differences between different tiers or levels. How far is the drop on average from quarterback 1 to quarterback 13? Okay, that kind of thing. Tight end, it drops 100 points from the tight end 1 to tight end 6. These are the kind of things that's going to help you see. Now, I'm just looking at PPR right now. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to this link in the description for this video on the website at fusionffb.com, or you're going to see it on my Twitter at fusionffb. But what you're going to do is you're going to go up to File. Okay, if I can bring this down. You're going to go up to File, and you're going to go down to Make a Copy, okay? And that's going to let you make your own, name it yourself, name it, Josh's 2021, whatever. And that's going to let you now edit it for your own particular league scoring. Now, right up here, you see this drop down. I already have logged in here. Many common scorings. Of course, we're on PPR now by default. There's half PPR, non-PPR. Scott Fishbowl, my own Fusion Flex, which is a modified version of Scott Fishbowl. Triple S is interesting. It was a tournament scoring I was in last year, had some interesting things in it, so I left it in here as an example. But you can go down to the bottom here, scoring tab, and here you have edit these in your copy. Edit these. Now, if you want, you can just copy whatever's closest and then just edit it. You can edit these. You can't edit these, all right? I mean, you probably can once you make your own copy, but it's going to warn you. It's going to say, are you sure you want to do that? Because you're going to mess something up, basically. And over here, same thing. Don't want to be messing with those cells. If you ever do, it's fine. Just download, make a fresh copy of the original, which you can't change. If you have any problems, let me know. If you run into any issues, I'd love to help you through it, help you use it, or maybe you find a bug. I am sure I easily could have messed something up. But you can put in your own scoring here, and then when you go back to the main page, right here, you see it'll come up. You can even rename it if you want. You can rename it something special, Josh's Special Scoring, and it'll show up right there, Josh's Special Scoring, and you can see how it changes. So let's dig into how it actually changes things. So in PPR, it's a pretty balanced scoring. It really is. I know some people dog it and like to go to half PPR. Let's see how things change for half PPR. So before we do that, let's look across the top. 341 for wide receivers, 401 for running backs. In half PPR, give it a second. Boom, see, there it goes. It changed. Took a minute. There's a lot of math going on in the background there, guys. So it dropped running backs down a bit and wide receivers down a good bit. Now it's 287, wide receivers 359. Running backs, you'll notice quarterbacks didn't change. Not at all. Tight ends, they definitely dropped, okay? So these are the kind of things you're going to be able to see how it affects whether you have your own tiers when you go to draft and so on. Eventually, I may have a more complex version of this out with ADPs, and you can insert projections and so on to really try to exploit and find the places where the differences between the tiers come together and where you can actually gain an edge. But for now, I wanted to get this out here. It's a very easy, just straightforward tool once you get past some of the details initially, and you can really dig into it and get a real feel for your league. I do want to say, as long as I got you, and as long as I got the video up, I want you to be able to see it. I mentioned how 2020 scoring was crazy. So I wanted to show you how crazy. This is, well, over here is the database of all the stats for the whole season. And actually in this database, I have the past 5 seasons now. Of these 5 seasons, you can see here, you have to look up there too much, but you can see right here. Let's zoom this up a little bit closer for you. No, that's not what I want. So you can see when it finally zooms in. All right. Green, generally good, right? You can see that it's just nothing but green under 2020. More points, NFL points, yards, plays, and so on. Passing numbers way up, touchdowns way up. They were very high in 2018 as well. We'll get to one of the differences here in a moment. You can see rushing wasn't crazy high, but the actual production was, and the touchdowns were high. Here's the thing. A lot of those rushing touchdowns were stolen by quarterbacks, which is why their scoring was so high. A lot more touchdowns by quarterbacks on the ground in 2020. So that meant running backs weren't getting those. So running backs were down. Quarterbacks were up because they were getting them. In the meantime, wide receivers didn't change much versus the average. Until you get down to wide receiver threes, fours, and fives, and they were scoring a lot more points. So it was a lot more spread out. But the top didn't actually score much more. And that's something I wanted to point out because you're going to hear people, analysts even, talking about how wide receivers scored more points in 2020 than any season before. And that may technically be true. However, it is not telling you the whole truth if it doesn't talk about the average at each ranking. And so that's why it's important to have the FF format beater and to be able to look at and compare the actual season's finish. So that's something we can actually do. I have that up here. It's going to be a little ugly here. I'm pushing wrong buttons all over the place, of course. So let's pull this out and pull it to the side. Pull this back up. And you can see the wide receivers right here. And I'm going to slide over to the wide receivers here. And we're going to look at the points per the rank. Going down through here versus PPR here. You can see pretty close to the same. A little bit higher over there at the very top. The top three guys were very good this year. Absolutely. So the 2 and 3 were a little higher than average. 4, dead on average. Okay. 5, dead on. I'm telling you, all the way down through here, it's very average until we get down into this range and it starts staying up a little bit until we especially get into this range and a lot of 150, 140, 130. There's not nearly a drop off once we get down into this range. And more than it continues down at a pretty high level, more than I even averaged out. And so when people talk to you about how, the 2020 season was amazing for wide receivers, you should be going wide receiver, heavy, 0 running back. It's not the whole story. Be careful. Use tools like this, and you can hopefully make the best decisions specific for your league. That's it. Didn't want to make it any longer than it had to be. Thanks for joining me, guys. Hope you enjoy this tool. Any suggestions, let me know. And good luck. More tools like this coming. Fun things that you can be useful. If there's anything specific, like I said, this was something that I always thought about. I always wanted to know. And so I just made it myself. If there's something like that you have, some kind of tool, I think somebody asked me about making an auction tool or something once. Let me know. Maybe I can do it. Maybe it's something that either I will also want to make or I can do it for you. Or I can point you in the way of how to do it for yourself because I'm all about you learning things on your own, using your passions. That's what I've done. I always liked spreadsheets, but once I started actually doing projections and stuff, I learned way more than I even realized I didn't know, right? So use your passions, learn new stuff. That's this week's lesson. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you on the next show I do whenever I do one. All right. See ya.